Using family historian templated sources in Ancestral Sources. Level Beginner. I recommend you watch the Ancestral Sources Introduction video first before this one, unless you're familiar with using Ancestral Sources. Templated sources first appeared in Family Historian version 7 and Ancestral Sources version 7 in 2020. Prior to version 7, all Family Historian sources were generic sources, which means that most of the key information about the source was recorded only in the title and the limited number of fields available. So in the screenshot there, most of the information is all recorded in the title. There is a generic type census and publication information. I've recorded the census reference, and there is a repository. But there isn't a precisely defined way that all users would record the data. Some people might put information into the author field or the custom ID, etc. It's all a bit vague. So for many users, this is enough, and they can continue to use generic sources in Family Historian and Ancestral Sources. But for many genealogists, it's important to provide much clearer information regarding the sources used and to have less ambiguity in terms of what data to record. So templated sources provide a number of fields which help to record the source information more precisely. So in this example here, we've got a source, but we've defined various fields: the region, the year, the location, the address, the head of household, the reference, and also the website where the data was found. And this means that we can ensure a consistency across our sources, that we are recording the information about the source in a very clearly defined way. There is still a title, which you can see at the top in yellow, but that title is just to be used within reports and things like that. It isn't being used to actually define the data within the source. Ancestral Sources makes it much easier to generate templated sources by filling in most of those fields for you. So this video will demonstrate adding a templated census source to Family Historian using Ancestral Sources. It will show you how to make sure the templated sources are included in your project. It will show you how to begin to use templated sources, and it will finish by showing you how the templated source generated by Ancestral Sources can be viewed in Family Historian. Before we can begin to use templated sources in Ancestral Sources, we need to make sure that the source templates have been imported into the project. So this is the Family Historian sample project, and I go up to Tools and Source Template Definitions. Now I can see here lots of templates that are available to me in the Advanced collection and also in the Essentials collection, and I would recommend for most users of Family Historian that they should use the Essentials collection, but there is of course nothing to stop you using different templates that either you might create yourself or from the Advanced collection. All of them will work in Ancestral Sources. But for the purposes of this video, we're just going to look at the Essentials collection, and the templates we're going to be interested in are the Church Register, the Census Returns, and the Civil Registration Certificate. The Church Register we'll use for baptisms, burials and marriages in churches. The Census Return obviously for census records, and the Civil Registration Certificate will be for births and deaths and other marriages. So we need to make sure that there is a green tick in this used column. That green tick indicates that the template has been loaded into the project. So in our case here, all of these three are already part of this project. But if they weren't, I would just click the Add to Project button down here, and that would then load the templates into the project so that I can then use them in the future. So I'm going to close that, and as always, before we move to Ancestral Sources, I'm going to just click Save here, and then we can begin to look at this project now in Ancestral Sources. In Ancestral Sources, I've loaded in the Family Historian sample project, and the essential templates should already be all set up and ready to be used. But just to check that, we'll go to Tools and Source Template Editor. And for the source type census here, we already have the Essentials census return template available. If we just have a check, say, on the death source type, we've got the civil registration certificate there. For marriage, we've actually got two templates. We've got the church register and the civil registration certificate. So there's nothing more that we need to do here. If you were bringing in templates from the advanced collection or your own custom templates, then you would need to use this screen to import those templates in before they can be used. There is help available via this help button here, and if you get stuck, you can always ask on the forums at the Family Historian User Group website. If we now go to Tools and Options, I'm going to tick the Use Template Sources tick box here, and I've also made sure that I've got the Generated by Family Historian option chosen at the bottom here. What that means is that the title for the source that is usually created by Ancestral Sources will be ignored, and Family Historian will instead generate the source title for us based on the rules for the template that we're using. Once I've chosen that option, you'll see that up here we now have a link to the Edit Templated Source, and if I click on that, we can see that the various fields that are part of that template currently have very little in there, although the England has been set into the region because that's the region we've got set here, but most of the other information has no data available to it yet. The ones that have the yellow A here, they will all be automatically filled in by Ancestral Sources, so the only ones we'll need to manually type in will be the collection and the URL. So I'm now going to go ahead and add a census record in exactly the same way as I explained in the Introduction to Ancestral Sources video. So now I've entered in the census information and I'm ready to click Save. But before I do that, I need to go to the Edit Template Sources link here and check on the information that's been entered. If you ever forget to do that, Ancestral Sources will warn you when you click Save so that you do get a chance to come in and enter this data. But you do need to check the data in here and confirm it with OK before you move on. Don't just assume that Ancestral Sources will create it. You do need to check it and confirm it. So the region England, the year 1861, the location has been filled in to match what's been typed into the place here. The address matches the address up here. The head of household is the first person in the census. The reference has been copied over from the reference ID, and the repository is the same as the repository that I selected up here. So the only two fields that need to be filled in, if we want to do so, is the collection and the URL. So I could put in here, say, Ancestry UK website, and the URL as www.ancestry.co.uk, and click OK, and then I'm going to save the entry, and then we'll have a look at what it looks like in Family Historian. So over in Family Historian, Samuel Appleton has a census fact and an occupation fact for the 1861 census, as does his wife Mary. Some of the children who were involved in the census as well, they have those. And by clicking on this yellow scroll icon here, we can see the sources, and we can see that all of these link back to a new 1861 census source. And if we click on that, we can see it's the templated source that we created in Ancestral Sources with all of the fields filled in. The title there has been generated by a family historian using the template rules. The text from source contains the transcripts that we entered in Ancestral Sources, and the media links back to the image as well. If we go over to the record window and we look at the sources tab, we can see the source there, and there's a template column that indicates that that's been created using the census return template, and it's got 14 citations, and we could view all of those in the view record links. Samuel and John and Mary and the other Samuel all have 3 links to this source because they have the census fact, an occupation fact, and also a birth that all use this source as a citation. So I hope you can see how ancestral sources can be used very successfully to fill in the details for a templated source, if that's what you wish to use.